Good evening, and thank you to everybody for joining us tonight for our webinar. If you haven't already done so, I'd like to ask you to please mute your phone. While we certainly do want to hear from you this evening, we do expect more than 20 folks on the call, and that can really make a lot of background noise. So if you could please, either using the mute function on your phone, mute your phone, or by pressing *6 as is noted on the screen. Again, this is Mike Zarnowski with Special Olympics Maryland's headquarters. I oversee our overall sports program. This is the second time that we've done this webinar in advance of the area directors meeting. And thank you for taking some time out this evening to join us. We'll be covering sports topics, primarily about the fall sports season, but several other things that we'll look at in just a minute. If we could, as we go through, certainly do want your questions, but I may need to ask to move along so we can get done in the allotted time that we have. Also, if you have any other more simple questions, you can use the question or the chat function in your GoToWebinar function. Nate Garland, our Chief Program Officer, is online and is focused on responding to questions and items that come in under chat, and he can give you some help with that if need be. So let's see. So here's our agenda for this evening. Again, we'll be talking about the fall sports season. We'll look at the sports calendar, which you all should have received, as well as talk through the status of our sports management teams, talk through some games and training and games registrations, coach certification, some updates on that, talk a little bit about the winter sports season, and then there's a few other items that we have to touch on. We're slotted for about 90 minutes this evening, and we'll see if we can't do better and beat that time. So everybody can get back in and watch, I don't know what's on, The Bachelor or whatever. But first, before we dive into that agenda, Adam Hayes from here in our office compiled some information in terms of our athletes who are out in Los Angeles for the World Games. Hopefully everyone got a chance to watch the countdown to the World Games hosted by Robin Roberts. That was on a few times last weekend over the weekend, and it featured a lot of our folks, and was just an excellent coverage. As well, we've had some appearances from our folks on the nightly updates. In fact, there's one going on right now on ESPN. Abby Resnick was on there. Alicia Gog has been appeared as well. But so far, we have the results that you see there. Eddie Murphy has earned a gold in his 500-meter time trial. That's cycling with a time of 1 minute, 53.35 seconds. Alicia Go had her 500-meter time trial, but unfortunately was disqualified in that race. Abby Resnick got a gold with her relay team for the medley relay, the 4x1 medley. She got a 4th place in her 100-meter freestyle and got her bronze in the 100-meter backstroke, and actually was featured on ESPN in her race and also receiving her backstroke, racing her backstroke race. So far, we don't have any results for Chris Dooley, who does kayaking, other than he did have his preliminary race today and did quite well for the 500. Terrell Limerick has been sailing, but they don't have any results posted yet, and that is Ben Stivic, not B. Stivic, in equestrian. I know he's doing his events. We just don't have anything posted as yet for him. So, the sports calendar. Hopefully you all received this. We have the dates for many of our competitions, actually all of the state-level competitions, community competitions, through next September, through next September. As you can see there, we've got them all posted, and we'll continue to add as we have them available. Most recently, we updated or placed the basketball tournament dates, which are April 2nd and 3rd at Hood College, Maryland School for the Deaf, and we're looking at some other locations as well, potentially Frederick Community College, as well as the high schools in the area there. We've also booked the kayaking time trials and championships for next year on September 17th, 2006, and October 1st will be the championship, as well as the golf championship at Queenstown Harbor Golf Course again, and that is October 2nd. The rest of the dates through the end of the year, community dates, are still to be determined. We'll put in the different deadlines and webinars as we get closer. We do have the webinar for the basketball tournament. This is the preseason coaches webinar. That's set for November the 17th. We also have posted most of our training opportunities for coaches that have been covered. We'll talk a little bit more about coaches training later on in the call. And then also the qualifiers that we know as of now. Later in the call, we'll talk through what the qualifiers are that we have for this season, and if you have some additional ones that you want to share, we can capture them at that time. We'll be looking to send an updated sports calendar out following the live area directors meeting on August the 8th. So the following Tuesday or Wednesday, we'll get one out, so you can bring additional qualifiers or competitions that you're scheduling to that. We do have several more that are being worked on, some more soccer, a couple more golf, a couple flag footballs, and a couple powerliftings I know for sure are being worked on, and I believe there's some other ones that are there. So, let's see. The sports management teams. We started this, it was a little bit of a slow start, but we do now have 6 sports management teams operating, and for those of you who aren't familiar with them, these are groups of, each is headed by a staff lead, the staff lead for that particular sport, and is composed of coaches, officials, games management team members, trying to get an athlete on each of those as well, and typically, and this is typically handled through the coach, but also some family representation. And their focus is on developing the sport, addressing issues related to the sport, and helping execute the competition. One of their main focuses as well is overall growth in the sport, increasing the participation, both through getting more athletes who are currently in Special Olympics involved, but also reaching out to additional athletes who aren't currently involved in Special Olympics to have them become involved with the program through that particular sport. In the September-October timeframe, we'll be launching 5 more. These are all the summer game sports, aquatics, athletics, and the athletics team will include distance running. It'll be a single team for the 2 because of the overlap that's there. Bocce, cheerleading, and softball. And then we'll be starting additional teams in 2016 in the beginning of the year. The final 5 sports, state-level sports for which we haven't launched one at that point. So kayaking, cycling, bowling, alpine skiing, and snowshoeing. The rundowns of these folks, and as we're looking at these, you'll notice a couple of them powerlifting, some others are, we could use a few more folks for them. So if you have a recommendation, please do submit it to the staff lead who you'll see on the slides. I should also say Kelly will be sending all these slides out to folks following tonight's call. We're also recording the session tonight, as is noted on the screen, and we'll post, assuming the recording goes okay, we'll post that recording and a link to it on YouTube with a link to it on MySOMD. So anyone who is that you wish to share this with can access it. So here we see the golf sports management team. Tommy George, as you can see down at the bottom, is the staff lead, and they were already underway looking at a couple of the issues they're dealing with are things such as the access to equipment, growing the sport, access to additional courses, and such. The flag football sports management team, we see here, again, could use a couple more folks, and we are definitely looking for a flag football athlete. While we are pursuing a few already, if you have someone you'd like to recommend, this would need to be, we'd want this to be an athlete who is currently involved with that particular sport. And Melissa Anger is the staff lead for this. One of the key issues that this group is working on is both the overall increased number of competitions and consistency of officiating, but also addressing the issue of access to officials. In speaking with our head official there, Bill Dixon, who is a football official, the high schools and others have an incredibly difficult time getting officials on for their events as well, and so that just adds to the challenge we have. And so we're looking at various ways that we can address that. Powerlifting, again, we're looking for some more folks. We had, I think, 3 other people on this group who had to drop off for various reasons. So we're looking to expand that. One of the key things that this powerlifting group is doing, for those of you who are familiar with the challenge at the USA Games, with the different weight bar that one of our athletes utilized, they are drafting the powerlifting sports management team is drafting a rule change to submit to Special Olympics International, and to have the rule change in terms of the allowable weight of the bar. And the folks here already have a first draft on that, and we'll be working on adjusting that and tweaking it and getting it in the proper format. And again, we're looking for a powerlifting athlete there. For soccer, great group that we've got here. Again, really looking at increasing the participation and such. And tennis. Tennis is a little bit unique in that this team is composed both of participants or folks from the community sports program as well as the Interscholastic Unified Sports Program as well. As you can see, Ali Rack and Kevin Reynolds are both on this team. And part of the reason behind that is looking at means to transition folks or participants from the interscholastic program when they graduate from high school, transitioning them into the community program and using that also as a springboard to develop more community tennis programs around the state. We have folks who are directly accessed with the USTA. Alicia is there, but also Nancy Van Winter and several other folks, and Diane have direct connections with the USTA. And they're very helpful in helping us get access to facilities and also access to additional coaches. So that's some of the key things that those folks are working on there. And then the basketball sports management team is getting ahead of the season, and this is the one that's actually timed best of all of them. But they're, again, looking at a variety of things. And when we get to the basketball session or portion of the agenda under the winter sports, we'll talk about a couple of the things that they're addressing at that time and potentially get a little feedback from you. So moving forward for the fall sports season, as you saw on the sports calendar, all the deadlines are listed there, but here for your convenience, and if you wish to send these out to your individual sports coaches, that's fine. These will also be gone over in their the sports-specific webinars. But the golf and kayaking deadlines sort of sync up, so we're providing them here for you. Again, the training registration deadline, that's when all the rosters need to be in GMS, and anybody who you add to your program following that date, that's great that they're training. They wouldn't be eligible for the state competition. As is typically the case, there's then a few days later, 8 to 10 days after that, is the deadline for any missing forms that haven't already been submitted to Special Olympics headquarters to get those in. As a reminder with that, that is not saying that anyone can start participating in the program without a valid medical or without a valid and up-to-date volunteer application and screening. No one can participate, as I'm sure you all know. This is just that date by which you need to get any forms that, for whatever reason, didn't make it into headquarters, get them in. That's also the date, pretty much standard. We're using that date as the date for when all head coaches have to meet their coach certification requirement. There's one variation here in that because of some scheduling, we're giving the golf coaches until September 10th to meet that requirement because of the scheduling of the live training for that. But pretty much standard, that last date for missing forms is also the last date for head coaches to get their certification in. And then the competition registration date, as is standard, that's when you have to have all of your delegation set. You need to have their events in. If they're on teams, you have to have the teams created in GMS, any entry score submitted, so on down the line, and then also delete anybody who is not a member of the team or a member of your delegation. Similarly, here are the dates for the Fall Sports Festival sports and soccer, so that would be, as noted above at the top, cycling, distance running, flag football, powerlifting, soccer, and tennis. I'm not going to go through the individual dates here again, but there are the three: the training registration, the missing forms, and the competition registration deadline. The one note there is that while the forms for soccer and for fall sports are due on the same date, that is September 14th, they need to be valid through the state competition. So the ones for fall sports need to be valid through October 24th. The ones for soccer need to be valid through November 1st for both medical and for volunteer applications. And then finally, the bowling deadlines. Again, there's the three main ones. There's a second, as is noted here on the screen, there's a second competition registration deadline. That is, the first one is to get everybody registered for for the regional tournaments, and then the second one is for after we've determined who can advance from the regional tournament to the state tournament or the championship. That's the date, the 23rd of November, by which you need to delete anybody who would not then be advancing for that. The coach preseason webinars, and I'm sorry, I should also note, for those of you who didn't see the email that went out a couple days ago, the sports calendar, as well as a handout that has all the preseason webinars and all the pre-competition webinars, went out not just to area leaders, the area director email list and the area support email list, but also to all registered coaches who were in sports training for one of those sports in 2014, as well as anybody, if you've already added people into 2015, they were also picked up as well. So they all received this information directly. We've got the various preseason webinars. You should have if you're offering the sport here, you should have your head coach attending this webinar. If the head coach is not available, and we realize that happens, the head coach should have someone else attend in his or her stead, and that person has the responsibility then of sharing that information with both the head coach and everybody in their program. That's responsible. As you see noted there, the golf recording, the golf session happened earlier, and we contacted the golf coaches individually for that, and the recording is available as well. The pre-competition webinars are listed there too, going through. And again, you see the two that are there for bowling. While we're on the screen, one thing to note, the Fall Sports Festival, in terms of locations and such, the Fall Sports Festival is at the same locations that we used last year, Mount St. Mary's University, and we will again be using Fort Ritchie, which is where we had the cycling competition last year, which was, from all reports, a big hit with the cycling competition. The cycling coaches and the athletes and families will be back there again. And kayaking will again be, both the time trials and the competition will again be at the Washington College Boathouse. And big kudos to Jack Brosius for being able to set up the courses out there for us well in advance and host time trials and such for folks. And golf will again be at the same location at Queenstown, and we will again, as we did for the first time last year, have both the Level 1 skills competition being conducted simultaneously with the stroke play or the course play competition as well. For bowling, the state competition will again be at Gaithersburg Bowl America, and 3 of the 4 bowling facilities will be the same. We will again we'll be using Gaithersburg again for one of the regional competitions. The Ellicott City site and Glen Burnie as well will again be used. The Bowler, which was the site that was out in Cumberland that we had used, unfortunately has closed. They closed a few months ago, and so we are pursuing a site in Hagerstown. We looked at the other site that's available in Cumberland, and while they're doing several renovations, they indicated to us that they will not be renovating the restrooms, which are not currently wheelchair accessible, and that unfortunately makes that a no-go for us. But we are looking at a site in Hagerstown and hope to have that nailed down when Tommy returns next week. Let's see. For fall qualifiers, these are the qualifiers that we've been informed of so far, unless I've missed one. These, again, are on the sports calendar. But if you could take a quick look there, we've got the 2, and if there's any that you know of that you will be hosting, your area will be hosting that are not listed here currently, if you could please let me know, I would really appreciate it, and we can add those in. And if you know them now, that's great. It lets me take a drink of water while you're answering. If you want to bring them with you On August the 8th, that's fine as well, and we'll get the information out, as I noted, the following Tuesday. But we do have 2 cycling competitions currently slotted. Prince George's County will be hosting one on August 23rd, which is a Sunday, and then Tracy Lee will be hosting the one in Sykesville at the Maryland State Police Driver Training Facility on September 12th. She will be doing that, by the way. We are taking entries for the event on the 12th through GMS, and we'll send some additional information out to folks for that. But you'll put your registrations right in GMS through that. And, of course, we can then advance those individuals into Fall Sports Festivals so you don't, as we do a lot for cycling or for aquatics and athletics for summer games, and that'll save you some time in terms of not having to enter them a second time. Currently, the only distance running qualifier that we have on the books is the Howard County one on October 4th. We do have 3 flag footballs, 2 Howard League dates, and then a flag football qualifier on October 4th as well. We're still nailing down the location for that and look to have that shared out relatively soon. We've got 6 right now for golf that are noted there. And I know of at least 2 or 3 additional ones that are trying to be nailed down at this point. 1 powerlifting at this moment, hosted by Howard County in Columbia. And then, 8 right now, soccer qualifiers, including, I think there's 5 or 6 league dates that Howard County is hosting, and then several others that are offered there as well. So that said, is there anybody on the call who has any qualifier that they know of with a date right now that is not on this list? And if you do, please just unmute your phone and let us know.
Hey, Mike. It's Mike Myers.
Hey, Mike.
The tunnel run has usually counted as a qualifying race for those that are competing in the 5K. Would that still be the case?
It will still count, yes. And actually, we'll go over during the call with that. But pretty much any sanctioned 5K race out there will count as a qualifier as well.
Okay, just making sure.
Yep.
Thanks.
Anyone else who has any qualifiers currently slotted or scheduled? Okay, we'll move ahead then. Just a couple things we wanted to touch on related to training and games registration, a few different things. This has come up and with a couple areas. I think most folks are aware of this, but I figured it was worth noting, and let me correct that little typo there. When the question comes up of who should be included in sports training, the bottom line is it's everybody who's participating in that sport program. So it's every athlete, every unified partner, every head coach, every assistant coach. If you have a sport coordinator, there's some areas that use that model. The sport coordinator should be in as typically as a head coach. And any volunteers that are part of your training program, not all of your volunteers necessarily, but volunteers who are part of your training program. All of them should be included and entered into sports training combined for that sport, even if they aren't advancing to state competition. We've heard from several folks who had folks who weren't, people who weren't included in there because they didn't think they needed to be in because they weren't going to state competition. Doesn't matter who's going to state competition. Everybody should be registered in training. If they didn't participate in time to be eligible for the state competition, they started after the training registration deadline, they still should be entered into training. You can add the training games never closes until the end of the year, so you can continue to add them in when they start up and become part of the program. So everyone should be entered in. And then also, even if they only showed up for one practice, if they participated in your program, they should be registered as participating in that sport. If they never showed up, no, they should not be included. If they signed up but never showed, no, don't include them in that case. But if they did show up, even for just one practice, they should be included because they did participate in that sport in that season. So everybody, all of these folks should be in there. And it'll save, number one, it'll reflect much better in terms of a reflection of your overall program's participation and such. But it will save a lot of cleanup and hustling at the end of the year when we're trying to get our final numbers in, and can look at how not just the state overall grew, or hopefully grew, but also how your area program grows, and comparing that against your goals that you set at the beginning of the year. Then also just a heads up in terms of registration fees for overnight events. As is the case, there will be, again, registration fees for summer games and for winter games. Those are reviewed each year, and George will share that information if there's any changes. Well, he'll give you the exact count or the exact cost when for 2016 when the budget information is sent out. But as we go through and look at various costs and such, typically what's passed along is some portion of the lodging and meal costs for those events, and that can fluctuate from year to year. So just want to give you the heads up that might change. We wouldn't anticipate a major change. We're not talking about a 20% or 30% increase at this point, but there could be a change of some, and just be prepared for that. The other is just a reminder, we talked through this for both winter games and particularly for summer games in terms of ratios of athletes to coaches and volunteers. Generally speaking, there should, as a rule of thumb, it's actually 4-to-1 is sort of the standard that Special Olympics uses across the board of one coach or volunteer for every 4 athletes is just a standard ratio for supervision, safety, so on down the line. Well, we're fine going to a 3-to-1 ratio. And that's sort of as a guideline of how many coaches or volunteers your delegation should have. And this is your official delegation that you would bring to any event. As was the case for winter games and for summer games, any areas who have coaches above that ratio, so if you have, 10 athletes and 8 coaches, or coaches and volunteers, that's a few more than are probably necessary. Assuming we've got the housing available, we're not going to say you can't bring them, but we will be charging you passing along the full cost of lodging and meals for those individuals. So again, if there is a housing concern, if there's housing space challenges, then there may be an issue of your ability to bring them, at least from an overnight standpoint. Wouldn't be an issue in terms of day of. But it's just you'll be bearing the full cost for that. So how that played out for summer games, again, was for the overnights. It was kind of obvious with the full cost of lodging and meals. It also applied to your day of, folks, and so charges for the lunches were passed along for that because we get charged for those lunches as well. One thing to note, which I don't know that we necessarily made really clear when we were sending this out, is we're not including Unified Partners in this ratio at all. We're not counting them as athletes or competitors. We're also not including them in your we called it your supervisor count, which are your coaches and volunteers. They're not counted on either end. So they're sort of, freelance players. And part of the reason behind that is that while we know and recognize that Unified Partners often assist with some supervisory responsibilities and for managing the delegation and such, in other cases, Unified Partners are younger athletes or younger competitors who really can't take on that responsibility, or they may have other responsibilities of their own. So we just don't count them in that ratio. They would be counted as part of your delegation, and if there was a charge for the delegation, they'd be included in that. They're just not factored into this 3-to-1 ratio guideline. What we'll also say is that they'll be waived in cases of small delegations, and what I mean by that is if you're only bringing 2 skiers and a coach, well, you're already above that ratio right there, and we're, of course, we're not going to be, at least we hope we aren't going to be unreasonable with anything like that. So when you get into smaller numbers, it gets to be a little bit, little nuanced there, but typically they would be waived in that case. What we will be doing, because again we looked at numbers and looked at counts of even for the day of events, and while there's no lodging cost for the day of events such as fall sports festival, soccer, so on down the line, we do have meal costs for everybody who's a member of the delegation. And in looking at some of the numbers, there were some significant differences where a large number of additional coaches or volunteers, well above a 3-to-1 ratio, were registered for folks. In all honesty, we don't know for sure whether they showed up because we don't check in necessarily the coaches and volunteers. And at that point, the lunches are already ordered or the meals are already ordered for that. We do check in terms of athletes, of course, whether they show for their competition or not. So it could well be that in many cases it was just people that your area forgot to scratch or remove from their delegation. But we will be going forward, we will be looking at that ratio and charging back to areas for the lunches for any coaches and volunteers above that 3-to-1 ratio. Again, in looking at it for some of the competitions, it was we were basically feeding all the families in some delegations, and that's just not the purpose of having a delegation that's bringing there. And it also it takes money away from what we can be using for other services for the athletes. So again, this is not saying we're charging you for lunches for your other coaches or your delegation members. But this is just anything that's above that 3-to-1 ratio for the individual day of events. So bowling, soccer, golf, kayaking, the one-day events where we provide that. At the competition registration deadline for each of those events, which is about 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks ahead of the actual competition, we can provide you with a count and tell you whether, hey, you will be incurring some meal costs. And again, we're not saying you can't bring the folks, and we're not saying that you can't include them in your delegation. We're just saying that there'll be a charge that's attached to that because we're just going to pass that cost along to you. But anyhow, so we'll give you that heads up about the competition registration at the competition registration deadline. You then will have the opportunity to scratch those folks or scratch some folks from your delegation if you inadvertently just forgot to erase them or delete them from the delegation. We realize that can happen, and we're not trying to penalize you from that. We're just trying to be fair in terms of how the costs are allocated and what's reasonable for a delegation. Okay. So that's it. Any questions on that? It's sort of a continuation of the policy and process that we've had in place for summer and winter games, and just kind of extending it to the day of events. And again, just want to be really clear when we're saying here is we are not now suddenly charging a fee for everybody who's coming to one of the events. It is strictly for coaches and volunteers in your delegation who are above a 3-to-1 ratio. Okay, and if you could please, if you don't need to or want to say something, if you could please mute your phone so we don't have some background noise. I can hear someone who has their phone unmuted with that. But again, open it up if anybody has a comment or a question, or if there's any question related to this. Okay, moving along. We haven't, for a while, had GMS training. This is for new users. And I know we had some scheduled in for a variety of reasons. I had to cancel them. So we will be offering and scheduling some new user training in an August-September timeframe. For those of you who aren't familiar with this, this is typically done as one-on-one training. We'll schedule it typically done by a webinar. We don't do this as classes or as groups because we found out the hard way that it really, for new users, it really doesn't work. There's too many different questions and too many different challenges that folks encounter, particularly because part of this typically is setting up the remote connection so they can get access to the GMS system on our network. And such, and trying to have more than one person do it at the same time just doesn't work. Again, so they are one-on-one. If someone wants to travel here to headquarters, or if I'm not going to say we're going to go and schedule things for folks going out to people to do it live and in person, but if somehow the schedules work out that that's possible, we can consider that. But if someone wants to travel here to headquarters, we likely can work something out for that as well. If you do have a new user, that person first needs to be approved by either their regional sports director or by Kelly Cox. And they need to be submitted by, I don't know if I put it on here, they need to be submitted by the area director. This isn't something where someone can step up and say, hey, I want to do this without going through the area director. That, of course, has to go through them. The person should be comfortable with computers, preferably with databases as well, but that's not really a requirement. They just can't be scared to use a computer and should be pretty comfortable with things. If they're comfortable using Excel, or if they're comfortable using a database program such as Access or something, FileMaker Pro, I think that's still around, or something like that, that's great. That's a nice added bonus on top of it. But at a minimum, they need to be comfortable with computers. They have to have an up-to-date volunteer screening. Anybody who has access to GMS has access to the database for their county, all their member records and such, or all their athlete records. So. Okay, and if we could please mute your phone. The woman who was just speaking, I'm not sure who it was. If you could mute your phone.
Sorry.
That's okay. Excuse me. They have to have an update screen because, again, they have access to confidential information. They need to have their own computer and a pretty good broadband connection for the computer that they're using. Okay, and again, if we could mute our phone, again, I'm hearing someone talking there with that. And then also, generally speaking, Windows operating system is generally preferred. We have been able to make a connection using Macs or Apples, but it is preferred. And I'm sorry, I should go back and say, while it is possible to use GMS, or let me rephrase that, to access our network and access GMS using a pad or a tablet, like an iPad or that type of tablet, it is not a pleasant experience. It's not something where you would want to be using that to operate GMS on a regular basis. I've used it on occasion on my tablet just to look stuff up, and it's just not a great experience. So strongly recommend they actually have either a laptop, a desktop, whatever, that type of computer. So if you have anyone who is interested, please do submit them in writing by email to your regional sports director or to Kelly Cox. And I'll tell you what, we're getting a fair amount of background noise now. I'm going to go ahead and do what's called put this into presentation mode, and that mutes everybody.
Presentation mode is now enabled.
That mutes everybody except me, and I'll open it back up for questions at various points as we go through. Okay. Again, the background noise was getting kind of bad there. So, coach certification. I'll tell you, we'll go through this. I'll give you the update, and then we'll open it up for questions at the end of this section. If you remember back when we first had this conversation, we were talking about this. Special Olympics Maryland, for a variety of reasons, had not been enforcing the long-standing Special Olympics policy that all coaches need to be certified. It's, again, a variety of reasons, but we started implementing it with the requirement for head coaches starting for basketball this past year. And with the note, and every time we said this, that ultimately it will be applied to all coaches. So with that, and I guess November 2014 is when we first really started rolling this out. You can see the numbers that are there in terms of the different sports. How many? We basically had no active certifications. Excuse me. At that time, some of the requirements for certification, such as the practicum, have been removed, and so that actually allowed us to take anybody who had been through a training and grant them certification, even if they had not submitted the practicum hours of actually working with the hours, or pretty much anybody who's a coach has done the practicum, they just haven't submitted the paperwork, so we were able to take care of that. But anyhow, so we went from starting with 0 active coaches when we first started dealing with this to right now we're just shy of 500. We were actually above 500 2 days ago, and just had about 20 whose certifications expired. So since 2014, or November of 2014, we've hosted 26 coach training sessions, which is about 24 more than we typically have done in a given year. And that's since that time, so a goodly number there. 11 of those sessions have been hosted or with areas, or in conjunction with areas, and are looking forward to more opportunities to do that as well. Through those 26 training sessions, and again, these are in person, or they could be ones that were hosted as webinars. We had 297 training attendees. I phrase it that way because in some cases, a coach may have attended more than one of the sessions. So it's not necessarily 297 different coaches. It's 297 attendees. Similarly, that 497, active coaches or active certifications there. There are, in several cases, coaches who are certified in multiple sports. I myself am certified in 3, and I know, I think Don Bewick is certified in 10. So there are several other folks who are multiple coaches and are coaches in multiple sports and are counted more than once there. But it's just looking at the numbers there, that was a huge jump, and a big thank you to all the areas and all the coaches for supporting this. For the, I think it was 8 different areas so far have hosted a training of some type, and thank you for doing that. We're looking to continue to do that, and really, for most sports, get rid of the model of everybody has to come to Towson, and that's the only time that you can be trained. I should also point out that those 26 training sessions and the nearly 300 attendees does not include any of the self-paced online training such as ASAP or other courses that are there. It is strictly the ones that have been hosted and folks have attended live as opposed to the self-paced. I didn't have a chance to pull the number of folks who have gone through an ASAP course. We can get access to that information, and we can share that with you should the interest be there. Or actually, I'm sure the interest is there. We'll have that pulled together for our sports committee, which meets sometime in August. Then by the end of next week, possibly as early as this weekend, but I'm going to say by the end of next week, we will be sending out to each area and to all coaches who were active in 2014 or 2015 an updated status of the trainings that have been attended, as well as their certification status. We went through, and areas can now access that information on their own. You can run your own reports. We had a session on that a couple months ago, the recording of which is available online as well if you didn't get to attend it or don't remember it. But we will be doing a push out at the beginning of the season with that information and with that status. With that, we are going to continue to extend the what we've been doing. Every time we send that out, several people come forward and say, "Hey, you're missing my training session that I went to," or, I should be covered, whatever the case may be. And we had said when we first launched this and sent out a couple rounds of updates or copies of what we had on record, we had said that we wanted to get that all those records in and all those responses in by January of 2015. And the reality was that folks just weren't checking until it really mattered for their particular sport. It's come up every season when it's come around to that we get a little flurry. And I think that's just the reality until we complete a full year. So we will continue. We would hope everybody has already told us of any training sessions that they've missed, or that we've missed, rather, in the database. But we will continue to accept those. If you come across, and we'll put the instructions in the thing that goes out to folks by the 8th of who to contact. It'll be your regional sports director, and they'll manage all that for you in terms of checking what's in and what's out, and so on down the line. But we will accept that then. Let's see. So also in the batch that goes out by no later than the 8th, that will include the training that's coming up that's available for this upcoming season, or anything that we actually have scheduled. We do have basketball training scheduled, which is a winter season, and we also have we have the live on snow. Coaches training for winter games, sports, also already scheduled. And so we'll include that, plus anything else that's in or anything that any area wants to work with us on. We are currently planning, and maybe planning on that next bullet there should be underlined and italicized, but planning to fully implement the coach certification policy in 2016, beginning with the summer game sports, beginning with aquatics, athletics, bocce, cheerleading, and softball. In a nutshell, and this is not, we're not going to go into all the details with that, but in a nutshell, the policy says that all coaches, not just head coaches, but head coaches and assistant coaches need to be certified. There is, for new assistant coaches, sort of a 3-year phase-in and learning process. So it's not that they need to be certified the minute they step on the court. If they're a head coach, we'd absolutely want to go through that process because they're taking on significant responsibility for the safety of the athletes and for managing the program. But for an assistant coach, there's a little bit more of a phased-in process with that. So we'll go through all that as we roll that out. And in addition, we really need to create or find a good, what we call an operational definition of what a coach is, as compared to a sports volunteer. A lot of times people list people as coaches who maybe aren't coaches, or really if they're the person who's out there helping you with your equipment at your track practice, but really aren't working with an athlete. And maybe they're not a coach. And part of the reason for that is if we're going to, in order to actually enforce or adhere to both the certification policy as well as, we'll touch on in a second with the concussion certification, we have to be able to say, draw a line that says this person is a coach and this person isn't a coach. And at this point in time, we really haven't found anything that's operational and can really handle that. I'm sure you know at a gut level what it is or what the person is. But in terms of, if push comes to shove and to actually be using it from a policy standpoint, we need to get that operational definition. So we'll be asking the sports committee to help us with that, but we also will be looking at getting input from you and from other folks as we go through on that too. Currently scheduled coach trainings, all but one of these, I believe, are on the sports calendar. In fact, I think some people have already signed up for several of these, so that's great. But we have, and these are all the live webinar, if you want to call it that, trainings that are currently available. We've got powerlifting here at headquarters. Jack Brosius is going to be hosting a kayaking coaches training at the Boathouse, which is the same location that we have the prelims and the time trials and the competition. And such as is noted there, the intent is, or the plan is to record those live trainings. I put planning quotation marks because, something could go wrong with the recording. So the plan, though, is to record those live trainings and see if we can't convert that into some means to use it for additional coaches training for those folks who weren't available to be there for the live sessions. Additionally, we have flag football and tennis being looked at underway, and also got a call from a couple cycling coaches who are interested, very experienced cycling coaches who are interested potentially in hosting a cycling training, and we'll be working with them as well. So as we have more of that information, of course, we'll share that both with you and with the relevant coaches for those sports. We are looking absolutely to host more of the Coaching Special Olympics athletes sessions as well as sports-specific training sessions. I think what many of you worked with Melissa Anger for basketball in last fall and winter, and I'm embarrassed. I don't remember exactly how many training sessions she had. I think it was 5 or 6 different basketball training sessions all over the state. And for large sports like that, I can easily see that as continuing as a model with that. With the sports management team for basketball coming on board, we can kind of share the wealth and the expertise as well for those sessions, but we absolutely are looking for areas who would be interested in hosting, again, whether it's the Coaching Special Olympics athletes or sports training sessions. We would be, basically we need the physical space for the, depending upon the content and the number of participants. Coaching Special Olympics athletes is really it's a classroom session. If it's a sports session, we of course would need some type of sports space. It doesn't necessarily have to be a stadium or something like that. It can be for soccer. We need an open field and a goal, and that's all that matters. We would want to be sure that there's a minimum of 5 to 7 participants who are coming to the session as well. And your regional sports director and the staff sports league can assist you with clinicians, materials, so on down the line, recruiting and advertising. If you are interested in potentially hosting one or are just thinking that, hey, maybe we could, contact your regional sports director, Sam Hodep for the Baltimore area, Melissa Anger for what we call sort of Central Maryland and Western Maryland, and Nick Anderson for Southern Maryland and the Eastern Shore. I should also note while we're looking here, we have master coaches sessions scheduled right now for soccer and for kayaking. We will certainly be adding one for bowling. We just don't have it slotted yet, and may do it for a couple other sports. For those of you who aren't familiar with those, we've held those for a couple sports already. Leading up, we did it for basketball, for cheerleading, and for softball. I think those were the only 3 we did. And they were very successful. I was really pleased that the model seems to be working. What that approach is, that the master's session is really taking the knowledge that coaches who have at least 5 years of experience and really know the sport, and quite honestly are probably not going to learn a heck of a lot going through sort of a general or a basic session for the sport or the rules or whatever, and basically getting them together for a conversation about how they work with their athletes, how they solve problems. As an example, for the softball session, which went extremely well, one of the issues I know that was talked about was dealing with pitchers who are afraid of the ball getting hit back with them, and talk through some different strategies and sessions with that. Or I think also another issue was around the calling of who's going to make a play in the outfield and that type of thing. And the coaches, number one, it formed a nice little network amongst the coaches who participated, but also it really helped them learn from each other. And just tossing out what Rich Bird out in Harford County does with Bob Golden in Montgomery County and so on down the line, and just sharing those ideas. And it was a nice, rich opportunity, and similarly for cheer and for basketball as well. And so we were going to continue these. But it really is only appropriate for folks who have a significant amount of experience. So we are also requiring that an area director recommend them for the session, as is noted there. If you have someone who is interested, submit their name through your regional sports director, and we'll get them connected up. We'll have that same information and what goes out to the area, to the coaches one that goes out by the 8th, as is noted there with the soccer master coaches on the 12th. We'll send something out to the soccer coaches well ahead of that. We're not going to hold up if the training information takes a little bit longer to compile. So let's see. Then we also have, this is a full listing of all the ASEP, that's the American Sports Education Program, all the ASEP courses that are available. I have rewritten and finishing now the instructions for these, because there have been some concern about both the instructions in signing up for them, as well as the instructions for getting reimbursement. And there have been some feedback from a couple coaches, and thank you to Nancy Schmidt for bringing to our attention the concern about that some content may need to be filtered, I guess, or adjusted. And that's that first bullet over there on the right, that they're advised that some content needs to kind of be adapted for the age and ability of their athletes. But this is the full listing of all the courses that are available regardless of season, and this is just through ASEP. And the subsidies and such. As we're getting into looking at a longer-term season for the various sports, the approach that we had taken before of just offering or promoting the courses for the sports that are coming up over the next 3 months probably doesn't work as best as it could be, because a basketball coach right now may be looking to take a course on basketball to prepare them for their basketball season, so we want to support them along those lines. And then one other note, the course that had been listed but is not there anymore is the Coaching Golf Principles, which is actually we brought to ASEP's attention that you couldn't order it anymore. Basically, they're revising the text upon which it was based. It's based off of a book that is being re-edited or rewritten. And that book has gone out of print. And so until it comes back into print and they revise the course accordingly, it will not be available. And so they also now, I believe, have removed it from their website so people can't inadvertently go in and select it. So anybody who's looking for that, and we, I believe, mentioned that with the coaches on the golf coaches session that we had last week. I also wanted to pull, this is, excuse me, these next two slides are pulled from the previous webinars that we had regarding coach training, and we haven't gotten many folks who have looked at taking advantage of some of the alternative training opportunities that are listed here. We have a lot of folks who go to the live session when we do an online or a master's or ASEP, but there are several other opportunities that are here, and this is just the sport-specific examples that folks can definitely take advantage of, and such. Courses from NFHS, National Federation of State High School Associations. They have live and online courses. The national governing bodies, any of their, if they're the national governing body for that sport, any of their live or online courses typically will be approved. We do have to go through kind of a pre-approval in case it's, if it's a webinar that's 20 minutes long, we're probably not going to count that for recertification, but it could be one piece that adds to that. So, excuse me. And there also needs to be some kind of evidence that you actually completed the course. We're looking at one right now that USTA is offering, and thank you to Nancy Van Winter for looking into that as well. But National Governing Body or Special Olympics officials trainings also count, and so on down the line. We will be looking probably starting at the beginning of the year, rolling out this structured mentoring experience for as an alternative or an additional option here as well. But just want to remind folks that all these different options are available there, and then also the big thing at the bottom there, any learning and development experience with advanced approval from headquarters here, we want to hear ideas for that, and our general tendency is, provided that it can be documented and it has some meat to it, we're going to lean more towards approving than disapproving. Again, we need to look at it first, but really come forward with your ideas. Similarly, those are all the sport-specific ones or sport ones. There's several other opportunities for coaching in general that, again, folks just haven't been taking advantage of, and that's okay if they're getting their needs met, but want to be sure that folks are available or are aware of these different ones, including for the bullet of pre-approved development courses. That can be, and I think we've had one person who's taken advantage of this so far, who's a teacher, and one of her teacher courses or courses for her recertification as a teacher for her teaching license and certification overlapped and covered what was an appropriate topic for recertification as a coach, and we absolutely counted that, and we certainly can look at that for pretty much anybody in that scenario. Can't automatically say ahead of time that it would be approved. We want to see the syllabus and what's covered and such. But again, if you're learning and you're getting that information through another source, it doesn't have to all come from Special Olympics. We certainly do want to look at that and support folks in that regard. So last in this section, and then we'll open it up for questions on coach certification, is the coach concussion certification requirement. As is noted on the next slide, we had to revise the timeline I got delayed on getting some stuff taken care of, but we will be rolling this out more directly and for folks. It is something that's starting in January of 2016. All coaches have to have completed concussion training. This says all the more why we need to have that operational definition of who is a coach and who isn't, because it can make a difference. And this is being driven not entirely, but significantly or to some degree by the insurance coverage, and we really need to apply to this. and meet this. So anyhow, to meet the requirement, just as a reminder, there are only 2 approved courses, the one from the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, and one from NAHS. And then at this point, no other courses have been approved by Special Olympics North America. And unlike the coach certification for their sports certification, where Maryland has a great deal of flexibility in what they can approve, we do not have authority to approve anything else. We've had several people come forward. We've submitted a couple suggestions to Special Olympics North America to see if they would approve them. And to date, we haven't gotten anything back of anything approved other than these 2 here. And I think to a great degree, that's probably going to be the case for a while until this all kind of settles down and they get things rolling more fluidly. So I'm not going to go through all the details here. The big thing, both of the courses are free, and the CDC is the one that's recommended. We will be, this was one of the big delays here. We had said we'd have CD-ROMs. I had said we would have CD-ROMs out a couple months ago, and that just did not happen. We will hand them out. I will put them in your hands personally on August the 8th at the area directors meeting, and then they'll be mailed to any area director who is not present at the meeting on the 8th. We'll mail them out the following Monday to any of those non-attendees. Additionally, we have a webinar scheduled for area quote-unquote presenters to kind of review the process. It'll be, I think it's booked as a webinar for an hour. I can't see it lasting that long, but on August 24th, excuse me, at 8 o'clock. And the CD-ROM here is the recording of the CDC session, so that while most coaches probably will take it online. If you wanted to offer it in a group setting, you could do it using the CD-ROM. It takes about 30 minutes to go through that, the CD, the recording, and for the most part is really you just playing the recording, potentially stopping and asking a few questions or having a brief conversation, but it's pretty much simple to go through that way. Excuse me. We will have a dedicated email address. I think it's sports or coaches at somd.org, and I didn't put it in here, but that will be part of that presentation. And so that you can host your live sessions and then submit the copy of the sign-in sheet to that email address. We will be sending out communication to all coaches who haven't completed the requirement, which right now is 99%. There's a handful who have. And we'll send that out in August and then monthly starting in October until we get through at least all the current coaches who we have set and good to go by January 1 of 2016, or by the time they actually start their season for the upcoming season. I do need to be clear with this, that this is, if a coach does not complete this, he or she cannot serve as a coach, and it may mean that their team cannot attend the competition, the state competition, or almost any competition, quite honestly. Again, it comes into play January 1st of 2016, so that does not affect the fall, but certainly is wise to get folks rolling on it in the fall as we go forward. And it is something that, again, if folks don't complete it, it could jeopardize participation by your athletes. And then tracking, similar to the tracking that we have for the sports certification. It's a similar type of certification in GMS. It's actually a little simpler than the sports certification. And you'll be able to pull reports for those as well. Additionally, at the beginning of each sports season, we'll do a push-out, just as we'll continue to do the push-out with the coach certification and training information. For the sports-specific stuff, we'll do that for the concussion training as well. And that said, I'm going to go ahead and unmute the line for a short period. If anybody has any questions related to coach certification, if you can feel free to ask, and then I'm going to remute, and we can go through the last couple things that we have here.
Presentation mode is now disabled.
So if anybody has any questions related to coach certification.
Pam here.
Hi, Pam.
Hi. I know that you have mentioned that there's a lot of conversation about actually defining what is a coach versus what is an assistant coach. When you're talking about when you're saying every coach has to have this concussion, is that coach and assistant coaches, everyone defined as a coach or an assistant coach, or everyone defined as a head coach?
Both certifications, both the sports certification and the concussion certification, the policy is all coaches. That's head coaches and that's assistant coaches. Anybody who has the word coach in their title,
Okay.
it applies to them.
And that's, well, you just backed up and said, you just said also that the sports training, the sports certification is also now for all assistant coaches.
No, I'm saying that's kicking in. The Special Olympics North America policy is that all coaches have that, and that's going to kick in. We have not applied it as yet. We will be applying that starting the plan is in 2016, starting with the Summer Games sports. Right now, because we haven't applied it at all until starting with basketball this year, we started out applying it strictly with head coaches. But the actual policy applies to all coaches. So we're phasing that in. For the concussion certification, January 1, it's everybody. That's one of the reasons why we want to get the overall sports certification kind of synced up with that. I don't want to do it too quickly because I don't know that we can handle that. So does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Pam, does that answer your question? Okay, you must have remuted. Any other questions related to coach certification or concussion certification?
Mike?
Yes.
This is Marilyn.
Hi, Marilyn.
You mentioned before, I'm sorry, you may have answered this. My phone went dead and I had to switch phones. But that coordinators, if we are in a coordinator system, should get coaches certification in their sport as well. So I assume that means that you're expecting them to also get the concussion training?
Yes. If they're in a leadership role and they're making any decisions related to that have any impact on the welfare of an athlete, that's a coaching role.
Okay.
So yeah, and that's why I'm saying that's where this whole operational definition really, we use so many different terms for different people that we need to get some clarity on that so that we can actually, with clarity, say, and we are all in agreement that this person is a coach and this person is not a coach. They can still get the training, but they're not a coach for our purposes.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Any other questions on certification?
Mike, this is Nate.
Hey, Nate.
If there's one thing also I can emphasize on the concussion training, this is a risk protocol and a health and safety issue. So while we'll be working really hard to get everybody the training, and then we'll also be looking at the process upon which how we communicate who is eligible, so to speak, or who hasn't completed the training. From a communication standpoint in your programs, this is no different than a Class A application for a coach. They do not step on the field, and they don't operate your program without this training in place.
Right.
So we have to work really hard to make sure before you launch the season that your coaches have completed the volunteer forms like you already do right now, and they've received this training. While certainly we would prefer that they receive all the different trainings prior to stepping on the field, we also understand some of the realistic challenges that we face to do and execute some of that, and as that will be a kind of long-term goal. But very seriously, we need to make sure from a risk position that all of your coaches have this concussion training before they start working with your athletes. That means the first day of practice. So it's going to be a process for us to get in place to make sure that we're working with you to do that, but we're going to really need your assistance on that.
Mike, sorry, this is Pam again. My phone died right as you were answering my question. But actually, I guess really my question is more sort of GMS related in terms of as volunteers are coming through, it's been sort of just easier to just, list even our high school volunteers as assistant coaches. But I think that we need to really then be screening who we are listing as coaches and assistant coaches based on what they actually, really are doing.
Correct. That's what we implemented. I don't know that everybody's utilizing it, but think it's been over a year now that there's been the category of volunteer/sub program, and we can rename that if it's weird. But within GMS training and actually within your delegations, there's a volunteer role that you can use as well. So,
and that should be listed in both places, so it appears on their sort of homepage, so to speak, as well as in the general training page where you say, this person only, and you can change their role, etc.
I'm going to say yes, but I got to be honest, I'm not 100% clear on what you're asking, but it may be something that we need to look at a GMS screen before I can give you a good answer on that.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on the certification? Okay. If not, I'm going to go ahead and go back into presentation mode to minimize the...
Presentation mode is now enabled.
To minimize the background noise. And let's go back ahead. We only have a couple more things to cover. Let's see. Keep going. Okay, the winter sports season. It's one of our goals overall, as we've discussed at several of the most recent area directors meetings, has been to continue to get planning further ahead. One of the successes so far, and we still want to get even better with it, is we've in essence got a full year ahead on actually a year and a few months right now for all of our at least community level competitions or community based competitions, and continue to do that. We also want to get together on that with all of the planning, and having the sports management teams in place will help with that. So, but in that spirit, wanted to touch base on a couple things related to winter games and then also basketball. For winter games, and this is on the sports calendar, but just a reminder, they are February 22nd and 23rd. The athlete on snow training and time trials are February 6th and 7th. The coach dryland is January 9th. And then the dryland training will be in November, held in conjunction. The plan is to hold it in conjunction with the November area director meeting or the conference that will be held. At that point, once that gets nailed down, we'll include that there. If for some reason that doesn't work well, we'll go ahead and schedule the coach training independent from that. That's the dryland training for them. And should also point out, while we strongly encourage coaches for winter games to go to both the dryland and the on snow, participation in either one of those does serve to recertify the coach from a certification standpoint. Then just wanted to have a very brief discussion related to two things related to winter games. One is whether the thought came up of having athletes be able to attend coach on snow training. For a lot of the coaching, sports-specific coaching sessions that we've had, or we like to have, having athletes as a part of that session, so the coaches have some athletes to work with during the session is a standard component. We haven't really done that for the coach on snow, but are looking at that as a possibility. Just as the costs for the coach on snow are borne by the area, and actually for the athletes on snow training in February are borne by the area, not the time trials, but the athletes on snow are. The cost here would be with the area, but just wanted to see what folks' thoughts were related to that. And then, again, I'll open the phone up in just a moment related to this. The other was around lodging property or the location. We've heard some concerns related to, let's just say, the quality of the lodging, the housing at the current place that we've stayed for winter games. That's the Clarion in Hagerstown. We have been approached by another site and are looking at this as a possible alternative, and wanted to get a little bit of feedback from folks. There's pluses and minuses, and they're summarized there in those bullets. But basically, it's part of the Ramada family. It's about 6 to 8 miles closer to Whitetail. And while it can definitely handle the dinner and the social, the dance function with the layout, it's actually, we can't get everybody into a single room, but with some additional activities, some quiet activities and such, we can definitely take care of it that way. But what we would not be able to do at this location is hold an evening ceremony or an indoor ceremony at that site. Now, we are looking at some other alternatives, whether nearby high school or Hagerstown Community College, something at Whitetail, should weather prevent us from doing a ceremony like we've done traditionally at Whitetail, not last year where we had the weather challenge. But just need to be upfront that the weather, that we would not be able to do a ceremony like we ultimately did at Winter Games this past year. Additionally, that main property, while at the Clarion and the building or the hotel that's attached to the Clarion, the extra, I forget exactly what it's called, but there's an extra building that's there, can handle pretty much all of the delegations. The main property here would only be able to handle about 60 or 70% of our needs, and we would be using some nearby properties as well. They're located by, I don't know whether it's a mall or whatever, but it's that mall area that's there by, I think it's by 81. So anyhow, we're not even sure that we can get all the housing needs met in that area at a price that we can afford. But we wanted to get some feedback from folks related to that as to whether, is having, there's a lot of energy around the possibility of having that ceremony and having everything there at the one location in the evening. There's a lot of positive around that. This would not be possible, and want to weigh that against the challenges with the quality of the lodging at the Clarion. Or the other side is maybe we're blowing the quality or the concern about the quality at the Clarion out of proportion, and maybe it's not as big a concern as we think we've heard it is. So that said, I'm going to open up the phone lines, and let's, since this is slightly more pressing time-wise, if I could get some feedback from folks related to this lodging issue related to Winter Games as to whether if all other things being equal, whether staying at the Clarion would outweigh going to a place with slightly nicer rooms, but not being able to do the ceremony indoors as a backup. So.
Presentation mode is now disabled.
So if you have something to contribute on that, you can unmute your phone, and then if you are not, if you don't need or don't wish to talk, if you could please just be sure your phone is muted, so we don't have some of the background noise. We had a child kind of crying in the background, so whoever has a child in the background, you may not be muted right now. So, okay, so thoughts?
Mike, this is Bob.
Hey, Bob.
I think that the closer we can get to the venue, the happier people will be. And if it's a nicer lodging option, all the better. So, I was hoping that you were going to say we were going back to WISP and we'd all be on site like we were in the past. So.
Okay, well, a question for you, Bob. If your delegation was not part of that 60 or 70%, but were at a nearby hotel and had to come to the main one for dinner, would that still, would you still be in favor of that arrangement?
I would, just because of the proximity to Whitetail, being 8 miles closer. But we stayed at other hotels beside the Clarion, and it seems like we're in the other hotels more often than not anyway. So, not an issue.
Okay. Other folks, other thoughts?
Mike, this is Nate. One other thing, just to be transparent to the group, we do not have what I would say contractual rates yet, so a potential impact could also be increased fees. While we don't know that to be the case, we just don't have contracts yet, so we can't tell you the totality of the impact of going to different locations as well.
I have a question. This is Mike. What would if you can't handle 60, if you can only handle 60 to 70% of the property, what is?
Okay. I'm sorry, we lost you there again. If folks are not speaking, if you could please mute your phone. There's someone who has a child who is having a very good time, but it's drowning out the conversation on the call.
I just had a question as to what is considered nearby. I'm not sure what property you're discussing, and so I don't know, is it like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes away?
Oh, 5 minutes. We're talking well, let's put it this way. We're looking, the main property that approached us is I think it's called the Ramada Plaza, which is right by there, by the mall there, and there are several other hotel properties.
So is that where the Spring Hill Suites is?
Yes, that's in that general area, I believe.
So some of it could be even walking distance then.
Correct. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's February, so I don't know that you'd be walking, but yes, it could. In theory, it could be close as walking distance.
But nearby, like what you're at. And do you have any feel at all for? I think it was Nate that just spoke about the contractual dollar amount.
Well, again, we don't have a contract at hand. The Ramada is offering us the same rate that we had at the Clarion. It's finding the additional properties at this moment.
You don't, right?
And that would have a similar rate as well.
Right. Okay. That's fine. I would be in favor then. I don't know. I can't speak for anybody else, but I would be in favor of moving just to try. And the other thing I don't understand is what is the evening or indoor ceremony? I was not there this past winter.
This past winter games, it was so bitter cold out. We have been doing an outdoor ceremonies on Monday morning before competition began.
You mean the opening ceremony?
The opening ceremony, right.
Okay.
And it was so cold, and people would be standing or seated for so long that we decided, for safety's sake, to move it. I guess we can't call it an opening ceremony, but what we would do as an opening ceremony, we did in the evening at the hotel immediately following dinner. So people ate, they went right into the ceremony, and then as soon as that was done, went right into the dance. So it was all one event. We would not be able to do that at this property. And we're looking at some alternative options, but it may mean if we had to go down that road because of weather or whatever, we may have to go elsewhere.
Put it in the trash.
Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate that.
Okay.
Mike, it's Frank.
Hey, Frank.
I'm just confused about how it can handle everybody there for dinner, but not have enough room for a ceremony.
Because there's for dinner we can use the restaurant. There's a large room that can handle about 250 people, and then 2 adjoining rooms that can handle about 80 people each. So the problem is not having, for the ceremony, not having a single space that's open where you can have everybody in the room at the same time.
8:30.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. What's nice, though, is that at least for the meal and for the dance portion, because not everybody goes to the dance, it's all contiguous space. It's just you have to go through a doorway, and there's some walls in there. So, I mean, there's a nice flow for dinner. It's just it's not one big open space where we could hold a ceremony. So, okay, any other input on that? Okay, I'm going to go ahead. Actually, I'll leave it open for now because we're almost done. Just going ahead then for basketball, just wanted to highlight, again, the dates are April 2nd and 3rd, as is noted on the sports calendar. They're later in the season, mainly because of when Palm Sunday and Easter hit. And we looked at doing the weekend before Palm Sunday and found that was the main weekend for all of the state championships for all the different levels in the high schools. And our ability, while we probably could find some facilities to host it in, our officials would be hard-pressed to be there. So that's why it's a little later. We do have the preseason webinar set up. Melissa's already set up the first coach training at Washington College, and the head women's coach at Washington College will be doing the training on November 15th. That's a tentative date at the moment. Yes, we do know that is the same day as the regional bowling tournament. So that's one of the reasons it's tentative, but we may, when you have more than one sport, there's bound to be a conflict at various points. So we'll do what we can for that. And then some of the issues that the sports management team is reviewing, just so that you know, not that we need to get feedback on these, but they're looking seriously, as are other, the football, any of the team sports are doing this as well, but looking at kind of the assessment and evaluation of teams at the beginning of the season so we can provide the best information back to coaches on what is who's a good match so they can set up their games throughout the season. Also looking at divisioning the best ways or improving our ability for divisioning folks for the championship competition to make sure the divisions are as good as possible, as well as throughout the season. Looking at the possibility of a mid-January early bird qualifier and seeing if that's feasible. We would have a decision on that within the next month or so, because that would affect folks getting their team rosters together and such. Don't know if it's feasible for this year, but it could serve as a nice way to get folks connected and get an early competition in. Again, scheduling multiple live trainings. And then this issue came up at basketball this past year, but looking at exit criteria for and guidance for coaches for 3v3 and PDU teams. We had a couple 3v3 teams and one PDU team, Player Development Unified team, where either the team as a whole or several individual players really weren't appropriate for that level. They were too good, quite honestly. They were too skilled in basketball for that level. The 3v3s definitely should have been on a 5-on-5 team. And finding competition for them at that level was challenging. The PDUs, the situation was they definitely should have been on a traditional 3v3 team. In fact, one of them probably could have been on a 5v5 team. And so looking at the exit criteria and kind of balancing that against the challenges of having enough folks. So just wanted to give you a heads up on what some of the things are that they're looking at. Then a couple other items which we'll just blow through. If you haven't noticed already, we spent a fair amount of time on MySOMD on the coaches section. And the calendar in particular now has every deadline, every state event, every qualifier that we've got. All of the webinars are listed on there with links and registration, so on down the line. It's really ratcheted up, and we're looking to continue to do that and maintain that throughout, as well as adding in additional resources per sport. There's also a section of links to recorded webinars. The golf webinar is there, as well as the webinar on coach certification. So
it is the right team.
Okay. And
her son did the lasagna.
Okay. If we could again mute your phone if you're not participating right now. Then the entry score analysis, I'll just show you here. Ainsley Henderson, who has been interning with us, and actually today was her last day. Okay, folks, if you're, if you could please mute your phone, or at least if you're not sure if you're muted, if you could not talk, you're making it hard for other folks to hear. But we'll provide this out to for folks here. It's something we did for Baltimore City's spring games a while ago, but it's a comparison of entry score to the final score, and it can really help in terms of identifying some challenges and where things are. We can talk some more about that later, but wanted to let you know that was there. The MySOMD area management sites, and we'll talk about that at the area directors meeting, and we're going to touch on it. And then as a last item, Nate, did you want to touch base on the Ravens training camp? You got about a minute and a half.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Annually, the Ravens have approached us since they moved out of Western Maryland College, where they used to host an open training camp to the public, and they moved it down to their training facility. We're now invite only and really limited public exposure. We've been a group that's been asked to bring out members of our organization. We did just get such invitation this week. The date is going to be Tuesday, August 11th. I do not have the details in front of me. I'll be reviewing the details and working with Kelly likely tomorrow, but no later than Friday, to send out a RSVP link that will go out to area directors and area director support. We're counting on you guys to distribute the link as you see fit to interested parties. I believe the number is going to be somewhere around 40 to 44 athletes or participants, and we'll define again exactly the number of athletes and chaperones, et cetera, that we can handle and communicate that effectively. And then again, that will be communicated no later by the end of this week. We do anticipate that it'll likely fill up, and we'll close down the registration link appropriately, but we imagine that will fill up typically in about 24 to 48 hours with interest. So we'll work to then quickly communicate to those who will attend to make sure they understand the details and to confirm their attendance. So any questions on that, we can take that offline. You could send me an email and ask the question. I, quite frankly, don't have all the details where this is something Jason Schimmel's handled in the past, and I'm handling it in his absence if he's on vacation.
Okay. So that said, just a couple reminders, upcoming meetings. I know that last I checked, we had 15 or 16 people already signed up for the other webinar that we're hosting prior to the Area Directors Live meeting. That's on August the 5th at 7:30. It'll cover the state of the program and financial information. I think George is going to review some budget information at that point as well. I've misplaced the invite for that, there's the webinar link to register. And again, you'll get these slides probably tomorrow. And then also as a reminder that the live meeting for Area Directors is on August the 8th from 9 to 5. And I know that Kelly will have the agenda out for that in the very near future. So unless there's any additional questions, and as you can see, I grabbed this slide from from something for the bowling tournaments, and I forgot to edit it. So, but feel free to contact your regional sport directors, and they're listed there. So that said, thank you very much. If the couple folks who were going to stay on for the follow-up or the continuation meeting, it only applies to people who were directly invited for that, so no need for anybody else to stay on. We talk about a different issue. Everybody else, thank you much. I'm going to go ahead and stop.